Without further ado, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Cracking the Backup Illusion, Ransomware Vulnerabilities Exposed. My name is Jack Flynn and I'll be your host for today. And look, what we're seeing in the market, I suppose, right now is that it's no longer just enterprise organizations that are being breached by cyber criminals. And there's been quite a significant increase in ransomware attacks across both Ireland and the UK. And this is why we believe this webinar is crucial for your organizations looking to protect their data and ensure business continuity. So I've got two speakers with me here today. Firstly, we have Peter Fogarty, a senior services executive with Echo. And then I also have Gary Piggott, one of our solutions architects for both disaster recovery and backup. So looking quickly at the agenda. So first, we've got three main topics for the main area of the content. Firstly, the ransomware threat landscape. So what's that? It's really what threats are out there, the most common ways that organizations are currently getting breached. Next, we'll look at business continuity post-ransomware. So including in that is going to be the 5 key areas of cyber resilience and some of the most common flaws when designing backup infrastructure. Finally, what we'll do is we'll look at how Echo protects against ransomware using our own proprietary air-gapped backup solution. And then what we'll do is we'll round off these with some key takeaways from the discussion, and then we'll move into our Q&A session. Okay, so if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A box. And what we'll do is towards the end, then we'll get those answered. Also, just one thing to highlight is the ransomware recovery assessment. So Gary, if you just go on to the next slide, I think I've mentioned it here. I'll go into more detail towards the end of the session, but what we are offering for people on this webinar is a free 5 to 10 minute assessment. And what that'll do is it'll give us a quick idea of your current disaster recovery and backup landscape. And then what we can do is we can organize for some of our technical team then to run you through the findings, and it'll be a nice report. So we'll give you details and the link to fill out that assessment at the end of the session. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to our first speaker, Peter Fogarty.
Thanks, Jack, and welcome everyone. Ransomware, the worst kind of disaster. So according to VM research, 85% of organizations surveyed have admitted to having at least one ransomware incident within the past year, and that number is staggering. In fact, only 16% of the companies that were attacked were able to recover the data without paying the ransom. Others had to pay thousands. Paying the ransom demand doesn't guarantee you will get your data back. In fact, 1 in 4 organizations who choose to pay the ransom still couldn't recover their data. Every one of these companies had some form of disaster recovery plan, but they still fell short in recovering their data because they couldn't restore from clean, reliable backups after a ransomware attack. So entries and targets, and how does ransomware get into your environment? I mean, the top one of all of them is phishing, 44%. End users still are the most common method of entry, and employees need to be educated. If you look at the likes of credential compromise and brute force external gateways, 35%. You look at the likes of, say, Juniper and Cisco, who recently issued critical security patches. In the last 2 days alone, both the US and Japanese law enforcement are warning that a state-sponsored hacking group from China is breaching network devices. We look at the likes of insider threats. Do you have a process in place to scrub access of users that have left or are leaving the business? Existing employees should only have access to the jobs or to the tools they need to do their jobs, and you shouldn't have super users within your organization. And then zero-day threats. I mean, these are impossible to protect against because you don't know what you don't know. So backups are a key target. So what does this tell us? An attacker only cares about 2 things: taking down your infrastructure and your data in one go and making money. Backups are a key target. We know this because in 2022, 94% of ransomware attacks targeted the backup repository. Backup repositories are in the crosshairs of attackers, and most backup platforms are not adequately protected because 75% of those attacks we know were successful. We know that they know that if they delete the backup jobs and all the backups, the likelihood of a ransomware being paid will skyrocket. The other thing to note is that 39% of backup repositories that become unusable after an attack. So even if you do pay the ransomware, you're not guaranteed to get your data back. And the last slide here, recovering from ransomware isn't easy, as an attack can cripple an organization. In fact, the ransomware trend report from Veeam shows that on average, it takes a company at least 3 weeks to recover after a ransomware attack. And that's just your key systems. Tier 2 and Tier 3 systems take even longer. Just imagine the impact on your organization if you couldn't access mission critical data for weeks. Two things that come to mind: the recent MGM attacks in the US, MGM hotel resorts, they lost out on 80 million in revenue simply because the slot machines were turned off for 10 days. And you don't have to just think about yourself. You got to think about your customers. Last year, Toyota had to suspend operations of 28 lines of 14 pants due to an attack on a supplier. So ransomware attack doesn't just affect you as a company, it obviously affects your customers and it affects your employees. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Gary from a technical perspective.
Good afternoon. So there's 4 key weaknesses that we've identified when it comes to the recovery process and why it's taking people 3 weeks or longer to get back up on their feet again after they get hit with ransomware. And ransomware is as Peter said, it's no longer an if, it's a when you get attacked. So the 4 things are lack of planning. People are just making it up as they go along. They're not testing plans, so their employees just, again, they're figuring it out as they go. They've never done it before, so your response is going to be slower. So that's a very significant one. The next thing is inadequate hardware. For too long, organizations have been cutting corners with their backup infrastructure. They've been recycling old systems from the previous generation production systems and using them as backup. They're not fast enough. Well, they're fine if you're restoring an email or a database, but if you need to bring everything back, they're just not fast enough. So their backup platforms aren't designed for a bulk recovery. And then, as Peter mentioned earlier, attackers are going after the repositories. Again, backup platforms are designed for ease of recovery and ease of administration. They're not secure environments, so they're being targeted and they're being destroyed by ransomware attackers. So they're the 4 key things that mean customers are taking longer to recover from ransomware, or maybe not even recovering at all. They're just going out of business. So to go into a bit more detail on the first point, planning. Okay, you need to have, everybody has a disaster recovery plan, but you need to have one specifically to do with a ransomware recovery. You can't just figure it out as you go. Otherwise you're losing hours or and usually days figuring this out before you can start your recovery. So the first 3 steps, the first 2 steps are to identify the data that you need to protect. Organizations are drowning in data right now. Not all of it should be backed up. So you need to focus on identifying what should be backed up and just, and to be restorable after a ransomware attack, and what doesn't need to be. And the smaller the recovery footprint, the quicker the recovery is going to be. Then you need to figure out the tools for the job. So again, you need to figure out what tools you can acquire and build so you can recover your entire estate quickly. Detection is one that isn't really focused on a huge amount. You need to be able to spot a ransomware attack early, because the sooner you spot that attack, the sooner you fix it. We were involved in a ransomware response there last year with an organization, and they spotted on a Monday morning that 2 of their servers were compromised. Because they didn't know what to do and didn't spot that it was a ransomware attack earlier, they didn't stop it at 2 servers. It ended up within the following 12 hours taking out their entire network. So you need to have the tools in place to start to spot that ransomware attack early and shut it down early. The next thing I mentioned on the list of 4 issues is testing. It's all very well and good having a response plan, but you need to test that. So first off, testing is how your team learns how to respond. If they do it over and over and over again, when you're doing it for real, you do it faster and you do it with more confidence, and you make less mistakes. So you have to continuously test your response plan. And as well as that, testing it over and over again and getting into the routine of testing your plan means that as your network changes, and your network changes continuously. Your plan is out of date the day after you draft it. You spot those gaps and you fix those gaps and you maintain that document and you keep it up to date. So repeated testing is vitally important. So Jack, you were going to put up a poll there on testing. So we just want to understand within the people who are on the call, how often do you test your ransomware response? So what I'll do is I'll go to the next slide here. Just talking about testing.
We're seeing
actually,
some.
Jack,
sorry, we're just give it 1 second there, Gary. I can see the questions coming in now, or the poll.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good to go now. Thank you.
Okay. So, we'd like to think we're great at testing and we do it really frequently. But even when it comes to basic backup testing, the vast majority of companies just aren't doing it properly. In the Veeam ransomware trends report that Peter referenced earlier on, you've got 60% of customers are just taking the reports that are coming out of their backup platform as gospel. So if they say the backup was successful, they're not actually doing any testing. A lot of the rest are doing, they're doing basic testing, but they're not testing to make sure that the platforms come up and the data is accessible. And then there's 4% that just aren't even testing at all. So we have a long way to go before we're testing properly. And again, testing is where not only are you sure your backups are valid, but also that your team are able to execute the plan correctly and your plan is kept up to date. So testing is massively important. So these are the 5 kind of key weaknesses that we've identified with, legacy backup. These are the backup platforms that are in place with customers today. And, these are how attackers are actually getting at your backups, killing your backups, and putting your backup against the wall. So you've got no choice but to pay the ransom. First off, they're not securing their backup servers. Backup servers, for convenience mostly, are running on the same network as production data. That means that it's trivial for an attacker to wipe your backup server at the same time as your production systems. And just that action alone costs you several hours because you have to rebuild the backup server, attach it to your backup storage before you can start your recovery process. So it slows you up. You've got an entire organization down, even if it is just for an hour extra or 2 hours extra, that is a significant cost to the organization. Second thing they're doing is they're not separating it from a network standpoint. If it's on the same network as the rest of the production systems, it's as open to attack as the rest of the systems. So you need to have dedicated networks away from production, isolated from your production data environments, to give you another layer of protection. Third thing is authentication there. Purely for convenience, most people are running their backup servers connected to the same Active Directory as their production systems. The first thing an attacker is going to do is try to get your domain admin credentials. If they have your domain admin credentials, they have full access to your backups. They can delete anything they want, and again, leave you with no option but to pay a ransom. We've got a lot of organizations. They may not have their backups sitting on the same SAN as their production systems, but they're on the same network as the production SAN. I'm seeing, it's routine now for attackers to just start deleting LUNs on SANs. So as well as wiping out your production data, they're wiping out your backups in those cases. And then the last thing is the recovery system, or the recovery time. When you're doing day-to-day routine recoveries, you're restoring individual files, databases, emails, or worst case, a server that got corrupted. Those systems aren't, when you're dealing with a ransomware attack, you're not restoring an individual server, you're restoring tens of servers, hundreds of servers. You need to have a backup platform that's fast enough to move that quantity of data at the speeds you need to. So, and just going back to that, as I mentioned, lots of people are just cheaping out on their backups, recycling old systems to actually, and putting them in services as backup hardware. So you're dealing with gigabit networking, slow disk speeds, slow CPUs, and that means you're restoring at megabits per second rather than the gigabits per second and tens of gigabits per second that you need to be able to restore at. So we've looked at a lot of these issues, these 5 issues in particular, and we've developed a proprietary solution called the Echo Air Gap. So what the Air Gap is, first off, it's a managed service delivered by Echo, and based on industry standard technology from our partners Veeam and Dell. And what it delivers is 2 immutable copies of your data, sitting on a secure appliance that's managed by us. So the 2 copies, the copy that sits on site is immutable. So even if your credentials are compromised, the data can't be deleted. So any backup data that's written to the appliance, it's usually immutable for 2 weeks is our standard config, although that changes depending on customer requirements. That means that that backup file cannot be changed or deleted in those 2 weeks. So it means that even if the attacker compromises, several layers of protection, the data stays intact and it's still recoverable. But what we also do is we've got an offsite copy. So even if you have a situation where the attacker has physical access to your infrastructure, there's a second copy sitting offsite in our Cloud Connect data centers. So, and again, we have insider deletion protection enabled on those. So even if an attacker has the credentials for your account, they can't delete that second copy offsite sitting in our data centers. So what it can back up is it can back up pretty much anything on your network or outside your network. So we have the ability to back up all the major hypervisors. So that's VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix as well, or physical systems, be they Windows or Linux-based. So we can do full system backups of those systems. We can also protect your cloud data. So if you're running Microsoft 365, we can protect that data on the appliance as well. If you have public cloud VMs running in Azure, running in AWS or Google Cloud, we can pull all that data down onto the appliance, protect it, and have a second copy offsite. As well as that, it's a managed service. So we're the ones doing the deployment, doing the monitoring, and in the event that you have an incident, we're doing the restores for you. So it's not something you need to worry about on a day-to-day basis. So the hardware it's a Dell PowerEdge server at its core, with a significant amount of storage capacity. We're doing these in various capacities from 10 terabytes up to 150 terabytes. We're also doing custom builds for the customers who need to be in the petabyte range. So we're able to store a massive amount of data locally and in Cloud Connect. The appliance is hardened. So on the very outside, it's running a software firewall on the appliance that doesn't allow any inbound connections. All the connections are initiated from the Veeam server behind that firewall out to your network and pulling that data in. So in the event that you have an attacker active on your network, he can't access the appliance. He can't even see the appliance. The appliance is basically a black hole on the firewall. So it's very hard for an attacker to notice. And even if he does notice it, he won't get into it. It's got a second network connection that is connected back to our management stack. So we're doing all the monitoring and support 24/7. So we're even doing, we're monitoring hardware health, performance, and also the backup events to make sure that the backups function correctly. The second copy is being backed up. Well, our Irish customers are backed up to our Irish data centers. We are also supporting our UK customers from our UK locations and also our Dutch customers in the Netherlands as well. So we have multiple data centers where we can store the second copy of the data. So when it comes to immutability, immutability is what everybody's asking for these days. So what immutability is when a file is written to the location, it can't be changed for a set period of time. So what we're seeing is cyber insurance companies are specifically asking about immutability these days. And if they don't hear that you have an immutable backup, they're refusing cyber insurance coverage. So we're delivering 2 layers of immutability, both on the appliance itself and also in our cloud. Because it's a fully managed service, the customer has no access usually, which means even if you have an insider attacking your network from the inside, a disgruntled employee, they have no access to the appliance as well. So it's totally secure. So features and benefits is the next thing. First off, that immutability means that, once a backup hits that box, we're holding on to it for the length of time you need to. We have customers that are only keeping kind of rolling week, right up to customers who have several years worth of retention sitting on these appliances. With immutability, it means that data is secure on that appliance for whatever length of time the customer deems necessary. So the attacker can't delete that data. Data recovery speed is, as I've mentioned it several times already, it is absolutely key. When customers use recycled old hardware, the hardware is slow. This is a current generation Dell EMC appliance with, running high-end CPUs, plenty of memory, fast disk, and as importantly, fast networking. These appliances have 10 gig and even 25 gig, multiple 25 gig network interfaces. So we can run as fast as your network can run. So again, when you need to restore terabytes of data, if you've got a 1 gig network, you're only going to move 10 terabytes of data a day. So that's one of the main reasons why you see organizations take weeks to recover. They have these network bottlenecks. But if you can deploy 10 gig networking to this appliance, you're looking at being able to restore 100 terabytes in a 24-hour period. So we can deliver much more rapid restores than you're going to experience with most legacy platforms. Management and monitoring is important. What you find is backup is not, most IT professionals' day-to-day job. It's part of their day. It's not their focus. So I'm not saying they're going to do it badly, but there are several unique skills that are lacking in general IT in Ireland today. When you take in a fully managed and monitored service from Echo, you have backup specialists doing your deployments and monitoring. These are people who do backup all day, every day. This is their job. So you're going to have a lot more experience and expertise in backups rather than trying to do it yourself. And then because we operate 24/7, those backups and the infrastructure health is being checked 24/7. If there's an issue, we're getting in and we're fixing it quickly. Quite often before, you in the organization know there's an issue, we'll have it fixed. Incident response is another thing. IT departments tend to be fairly lean these days. You're usually looking at one engineer per 100 staff members. That's fine day to day when you're managing systems and monitoring systems, but in the event that you have a ransomware attack active on your network, you need a lot more bodies to help you out. Otherwise, you'll never get on top of it. So in the event of an incident, you can rely on Echo to roll in with specialists, not just in backup, but also information security, platform specialists, to be able to assist you in getting your systems back up and running as quickly as humanly possible, which is something you're not going to be able to do if you go out and buy in hardware and build it yourself and run it yourself. You just won't have access to those numbers of staff. The other thing is because it's fully managed and monitored, you don't have to do any checks or tests or reports data yourself. We do them for you, and because we do this at scale, we've automated a lot of it for you as well. There's a web dashboard you can log into, and you can see the health of your backups at any on demand. But we're doing all that for you, so there's no need. So there's savings to be gained there because you're not actually making any. You don't have to run your own backups. It's fully automated, and we're running it for you. And the next thing is scale up and scale down. To do backups properly, it's a very capital-intensive process. You're buying in storage and servers, and it has a set capacity. If your business requirements change over time, you're looking at expensive upgrades to buy in, additional SAN capacity, additional compute capacity. So you're looking at quite often unpredicted costs to your business and significant ones of that. With a managed service, first off, there is no capital outlay. The product is sold as it's a service. You pay by the month based on your capacity. So in the event that your requirements increase or decrease, we can just swap out that box and do a data migration. So, if today you're a 50 terabyte customer and in 6 months' time you become a 150 terabyte customer, you're not going to have to throw out that 50 terabyte appliance and bring in a 150. We'll do the swap out for you. We'll manage the migration of the data, and your monthly bill is just going to have a proportional increase or decrease depending on your needs. So that's something you can only do with a service-based solution. So I suppose the 4 key takeaways is have a plan. Okay, you're never going to figure this out on the day. The customers who do try and figure it out on the day tend to run around like headless chickens for quite a while before they actually start moving ahead with their recovery. Having the plan saves you quite often days in your response. As important as having a plan is to test that plan. Training is one of the key gains from doing those testing. Your staff doing it over and over and over again will get to a stage where it's second nature. They're not panicking. They know what they need to do, the order they need to do it in, and they will do it right when it happens for real. The other benefit of doing your regular testing is you spot your gaps, things you missed in your plan, or as always happens, your network changes every day. So it will highlight those changes and feed back into that plan, and your plan is going to get better. And you should certainly be testing regularly. We recommend at least every quarter if you can. But as we've seen previously, customers they're just not doing that. They're not getting around to it that quickly. So keep on doing those tests over and over, train your staff, spot your gaps, make your plan better. So the next thing is mutability. If your backup can be damaged by an attacker, it will be, okay? We saw earlier in the Veeam report, Veeam ransomware report, that there's a non-trivial percentage of backups that are damaged as part of the attack. So again, your back is against the wall. You have no choice but to pay the ransom. Also, even you got a quarter of organizations that do pay their ransom don't get their data back. They either get a key and it doesn't work, or the backup's been so badly damaged during the attack that there's nothing left to recover. So you can't rely on paying your ransom every time and getting your data back. Even if you could, what we're seeing more and more now is, everybody likes to think that, cyber recovery insurance will cover that ransom. These days, I've been involved in a number of discussions and interactions with insurance companies over the last few years. They're getting stricter and stricter with the requirements they want to put on an organization before they'll issue a policy. They want to see 3 copies of data, so that's your production data, an on-site copy, and an off-site copy, and they want to know that at least one of those backups is immutable. If that 3rd copy isn't immutable, they are not issuing a policy, or they'll have a massive carve-out where they won't pay your ransomware recovery. They won't pay the ransom. They may cover some costs, but they're not paying that ransom if you don't have that immutable backup. Okay. And then the last thing is speed. I've said it multiple times. You cannot cut corners when it comes to the performance of your backup platform. You have to be, if your data estate is in the terabytes, then you need to have, gigabit network speeds, and gigabit throughput is not fast enough. Okay, I've seen so many ransomware responses where the backup restore performance has been the bottleneck. That's meant, companies have taken weeks or even months to recover. We're even, we've even worked with a company in the past. They got an attack last year. They're still bringing up their tertiary systems a year later because they just couldn't get that data out quick enough. And it's just been a long, laborious process. As well as that, they had no plan. They were figuring it out on the day. So backup performance, how fast can you get all that data back out of the appliance? That's key. People don't think about that day to day because, they're just been asked to restore a database or an email. That's small amounts of data, doesn't require a huge amount of bandwidth. But if you need to restore tens of terabytes of data, you need to have those 10 gig networks, and you need to have storage that can feed that 10 gig network to be able to recover quickly. And you're not going to do that with previous generation equipment that you retired from production. So performance of the backup hardware is absolutely key. So that's really all I have. I think Jack, do we want to jump into a Q&A?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Gary. Really appreciate that. So guys, look, this is the Q&A part of the session. I know there was a lot covered there. Everything from, the ransomware threat landscape, what the guys are seeing in the market right now, all the way to the Echo Air gap. So if you just want to just get your questions in into the Q&A box now, that'd be great. And I will begin off here now. So the first questions coming in here that I see is, do you provide a plan in the managed services?
We provide a plan. If only it was that simple, is the quick answer to that. We'll provide guidance when it comes to a plan, but every customer is different. You've got different requirements, different compliance requirements. So we will assist you and work with you to develop a plan, but it's not there, there's no such thing, unfortunately, as a canned plan that we can offer.
Okay.
We do that as part of a consultancy engagement, as Connor's just after answering there. So it is a plan is a process, but yes, we can certainly help with those.
Okay. And I think you already mentioned something along the lines of this, but does immutability affect my cyber insurance?
Absolutely. There's a lot of insurers have it as a hard requirement. You must have at least 3 copies of your data, and it must be mutable. Otherwise, there'll be a massive carve out in your policy. It's not that they're going to charge a higher premium. They will just refuse to cover certain aspects of your recovery, if any, if they'll cover anything at all. But certainly, they will deny coverage for ransom payouts.
Okay.
So immutability is a hard requirement these days. It's changed over the last couple of years. 5 years ago, a general purpose all risk policy would cover ransomware. Then you start seeing specific cyber policies that would cover everything. Now those cyber policies are getting very prescriptive in what they will cover and what they require on you before they'll actually deliver that. So yeah, it's changed.
Yeah, it's becoming a real requirement now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is involved with moving from a traditional online backup to the air gap?
The deployment is actually fairly simple. We have a discovery document that we work with customers to fill in, and we'll configure the backups from there. If you're already using Veeam, and this product is based on Veeam, within a hardened environment, of course, we can migrate that data into the platform. But if you're coming to Veeam, from a totally different product, then we'll do a greenfield deployment of Veeam with the appliance.
Okay, and actually that segues quite nicely into our last question, which is what platforms are supported?
Pretty much everything, all the major hypervisor vendors. So Microsoft Hyper-V, VMware, vSphere is supported, Nutanix is supported, and then physical systems we support. We will protect, all the Windows and Linux OSs as well, plus data sitting in public clouds from, Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and Google Cloud.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Well, look, if there's no more questions, guys, we just want to bring up one more slide or just a quick mention of the ransomware recovery assessment. So, look, as I mentioned, it takes about 4 or 5 minutes to fill out, and what we can do and what we're offering just for people that are on the webinar today is that we'll take that information and we'll be able to provide a report. And what we'll do is we do a 20-minute call afterwards with one of our technical team who can actually run through the report with you. So it's a really good opportunity to get just a rough idea of your current landscape. And just on the next slide here, to show you, it has a really nice heat map as well, a full breakdown of what this means, but also a heat map of where you may be struggling. So you can see in this screenshot here from one of the ones that we've had before, really where they're struggling is more on the disaster recovery side versus the backup side of things, and then a bit of the security and compliance. So as I said, it could be really, really useful in that respect. And what it'll do is we'll give you recommendations, and also you'll see how you benchmark across against like your industry peers. So it's a really useful assessment. And what we'll do is I'll put a link in the chat now, for anyone who does want to do it right now. And otherwise, what we'll do is I think the marketing team will be sending you out an email tomorrow with the webinar slides, the recording, and also this link. So if you don't get time to do it today, be sure to do it soon, and we'll get that set up. Okay, so look, I just want to close out and say a big thank you to our speakers and all the attendees for their participation today. As I said, look, you'll receive that email tomorrow with all the details, and look, we'll be getting on to you again over the coming weeks with more of our good talks coming up for the end of the year. Okay, so I hope you have a great day, guys, and I'll close out the call now. Thanks very much.